This is Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate, the podcast where we cover home buying, home selling, home improvement tips and ideas, market trends and developments, and investing in real estate. If you own real estate in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, or want to own real estate here, then you're in the right place. Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate is hosted by Blake Watson, a real estate agent and investor in Tennessee and Georgia.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate. I'm Blake Watson, realtor with Epic Realty in Tennessee and Georgia. And today, we're going to take a 20-year look back at what's really happened in the Chattanooga housing market. Because if you've been here a while, you've felt it. Housing prices are up. Demand is strong. Growth is happening, not just in Chattanooga, but all around it. But how did we get to this point? Did this boom come out of nowhere, or has it been building for years? Well, let's rewind back to 2006, or we could go even further back. But Chattanooga, back in those days, was still relatively affordable, still somewhat under the radar. And then came the 2007-2008 housing crash, kicking off the Great Recession. Now, here's something important. Chattanooga didn't collapse the way some major markets did. Instead, we saw more of a slowdown, a pause in growth. And that matters because it meant we didn't have the same level of overbuilding going into the next decade. Furthermore, a major announcement happened in July 2008 that would give Chattanooga the shot in the arm we needed. Volkswagen announced that it would build its only U.S. manufacturing plant here in Chattanooga. It was a sign of hope and prosperity in the most challenging of economic times. Construction began in 2009, and in the spring of 2011, cars started rolling out of the plant right here in Chattanooga. But that alone was not enough to change everything. From 2010 to 2019, really the teens, something really important was happening. Chattanooga was quietly transforming. You had economic growth, manufacturing strength with VW, then the Amazon distribution, and then trucking and logistics companies were growing, and there was rising employment across all demographics. In fact, research from UTC, the University of Tennessee here in Chattanooga, shows that employment growth in the region outpaced national trends for much of the decade, with gains across nearly every demographic group. At the same time, infrastructure investments like the citywide gig-speed internet launched in 2010 generated billions in economic impact, and it helped put Chattanooga on the map nationally. People from all over the country started hearing about Chattanooga, Tennessee. And as jobs and opportunity increased, so did demand for housing. But here's the key. Housing supply didn't keep up. According to UTC's Center for Regional Economic Research, by the mid-2010s into the early 2020s, the number of households was growing faster than the number of housing units. That meant tightening vacancy rates, and it put upward pressure on prices. That is a foundational shift. We had more people moving in, more households starting, and yet there were fewer units being built. And then came 2020. Low interest rates, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, remote work, and a nationwide shift in where people wanted to live. Chattanooga became a destination. According to the latest UTC Center for Regional Economic Research white paper, the Chattanooga metro area grew at more than twice the national population growth rate between 2020 and 2025, driven largely by people moving in from other parts of the country. Did you get that? Let it sink in. Not just growth, but above average growth fueled by migration. If you've lived in Chattanooga a long time, you know that it's only been since 2020 that we've had a lot of new neighbors, coworkers, and friends who moved here from California, New York, and other places that used to seem really far away. That's exactly the kind of demand shock that pushes housing markets hard. And that's what we saw. Rapid price appreciation, historically low inventory, intense competition among buyers. Now, here's something a lot of people miss. This wasn't just a Chattanooga story. It was a regional housing shift. And not just the Sun Belt as a region. We hear a lot about that on the national news. Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Florida, the Carolinas. It was happening in all of those areas, of course, but very much so in our local region right here around Chattanooga. As demand increased and prices rose in Hamilton County, buyers began looking outward into northwest Georgia, Catoosa and Walker counties, into Bradley County, Cleveland, Tennessee, into surrounding rural and suburban areas. Why? Affordability. When one market tightens, demand spills outward, and that's exactly what happened here. Now let's talk about what might be the most important takeaway from this research, the supply-demand imbalance. We have a structural housing shortage. That's not hype, that's just data. UTC research shows that over time, household growth has outpaced housing unit growth, which reduces vacancy and increases price pressure. At the same time, we've had rising construction costs. That is a nationwide, possibly worldwide, certainly nationwide problem. And there's been labor shortages in building trades. The carpenters, the plumbers, the electricians, the flooring people, the concrete people. All of these trades have labor shortages. Then there's zoning, infrastructure, and development constraints. All of that makes it harder to add new inventory fast enough. Now, the city of Chattanooga, just in the past 2 years, made an important step to add ADUs as an option on residential lots. An ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, and what that means is that if you have a residential lot in the city of Chattanooga, unless you have a neighborhood association that forbids it, the city of Chattanooga permits you to build a smaller structure on your lot. It's a maximum of a 700 square foot home. There are certainly some limitations to that. It can go in a side yard or a backyard, but it can be a separate dwelling. A lot of people might think of it as an in-law suite, or maybe you have some family members that need a home and they can do well with a small home right there on your lot. And that's called an accessory dwelling unit. That is something that the city of Chattanooga has put into place to address this very issue of housing shortage. Now let's talk about what everyone feels, and that's prices. Home prices have risen significantly over the past 20 years. That's evident to everyone here, and especially the prices have risen in the last 5 to 6 years. But here's an interesting nuance from the UTC data. While affordability has declined compared to pre-pandemic levels, income growth in Chattanooga has actually helped offset some of that pressure, making the situation less severe than it might appear at first glance. However, mortgage rates have roughly doubled compared to 2019-2020 levels, and that has become the single biggest factor impacting affordability today. When mortgage interest rates are significantly higher than they were just a few years ago, it certainly is going to impact affordability, and it does. So it's not just price, it's the cost of financing. So where are we today? The frenzy of 2021 and 2022 has certainly cooled. Mortgage interest rates have risen from the low 3% range back in 2022 to 7s and even 8% at the peak in 2024. And now they've settled back into the low 6% range. Homes are taking longer to sell. Buyers have more options with more inventory of available homes. And the market feels more balanced, more like the old days. But, and this is critical, the underlying drivers haven't gone away. Population is still growing. Migration inbound into Chattanooga is still positive. In fact, the region is expected to surpass 600,000 people by 2026. That's according to data published by UTC in April of this year. And inventory is still relatively tight compared to long-term norms. So what we're seeing certainly isn't a housing collapse or a crisis. It's just a normalization. What does this mean for you? Well, if you're a buyer, you finally have some breathing room, but you're still navigating a market that's shaped by long-term supply constraints and interest rates that are higher than pandemic levels. If you're a seller, you may not get multiple offers anymore, but demand is still there, especially for well-priced homes. And if you're just watching all this unfold, what you're seeing today is the result of 20 years of economic growth, migration, and housing imbalance, all compressed into a few intense years. So just looking at all of this information as a whole, Chattanooga didn't boom overnight. This didn't just happen in the past few years. This has been building for decades. Economic growth, infrastructure investment in fiber optics with EPB. But then the roads, the sewer, and school infrastructure has been lagging behind the growth. Population has continued to inflow into Chattanooga, and there's still limited housing supply. So if you've got questions about what this means for your specific situation, how this impacts you, whether you're buying, selling, or you're just trying to figure out your next move, I'd love to help. That's what I do. You can reach me, Blake Watson, at 423-315-1815, or visit my website, athomechattanooga.com. That's athomechattanooga.com. Or you can connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn as Blake Watson and on Instagram as Rock and Roll Blake. I'm Blake Watson with Epic Realty. My brokerage phone is 888-893-3537. And if this episode helped you better understand what's going on in our market, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That's it for today's episode of Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate. Thanks for listening, and as always, I wish you the best on your real estate journey.